evening light was dim as it entered through the small window of my home, stretching long shadows across the walls and floor. I have sat in this room many evenings, but tonight, as I feel the warmth of the fire fading into the cool air, my heart carries me back to the beginning of my life. These wrinkled hands you see now were once soft and small, belonging to a little girl who knew little of the world but would soon come to understand its harshness and its beauty. I was born in a village not far from here, a place where the earth itself seemed older than time, and the lives of people were woven tightly with the soil they tilled. Our home was smaller than this one, its roof patched with straw, its walls breathing dust in summer and dripping with leaks in the rains. We had no light, but the lamps we lit with oil, and the nights were always filled with the chorus of crickets, barking dogs, and the sighs of weary workers sleeping under the same roof. My father's hands were hard from the land, his skin cracked like the fields he plowed, but his eyes carried a kindness that gave me strength even in the worst of days. My mother was a gentle woman, though her back bent early with labor. She was always tired, always quiet, yet her silence was not empty. It was filled with love, with patience, with sacrifice. Between them, they gave us children all they could, though what they had was little. I grew up learning quickly that life does not hand out gifts freely. It demands effort, sacrifice, and sometimes pain. One of my earliest memories is of hunger. The sky that year was gray. The rains never came, and the earth cracked open under the sun. The crops withered before our eyes, and the jars that once held grain became emptier each day. My little brother, not much younger than I was, became weak. His legs trembled when he tried to stand, and his eyes looked too big for his thin face. My mother made broth out of nothing more than water and a pinch of salt, trying to fool our bellies into thinking we had eaten. I remember holding his hand at night, feeling the bones under his skin, listening to his shallow breaths. That winter took him from us. I can still see the way my mother wept, clutching the earth where he was laid, and my father standing silently as though grief had turned him into stone. That was the first lesson life gave me, that joy can be taken swiftly and that love often walks hand in hand with sorrow. I was only a child, but something inside me changed. I stopped being a girl who dreamed of dolls and play. I became someone who understood that every grain of rice, every drop of milk, every smile shared between tired faces was precious beyond measure. Still, even in those days of hardship, there were moments that glowed like embers in the dark. I remember sitting by the river with friends, our feet dipped in the cool water as we braided flowers into each other's hair. We laughed at the simplest of things, our laughter echoing against the hills, rising above the poverty that bound us. Those were the sparks of happiness that reminded me that even in the harshest seasons, the human heart seeks joy. But the world beyond our village was shifting, though I could not yet understand it. Men whispered about unrest, about war, about borders that would be drawn and redrawn. I felt it in the air, even as a child, the sense of a storm waiting just beyond the horizon. And when that storm arrived, it did not ask who was ready. It came like a flood, sweeping away the fragile peace we had built. The day it began, I was still young, too young to know what war truly meant, yet old enough to feel its weight. Soldiers passed through the village, their boots heavy on the soil, their eyes sharp with suspicion. Families fled, carrying what little they could, Houses were burned, fields destroyed, and the sky, once filled with birdsong, became a place of smoke and ash. I remember clutching my mother's sari as she pulled me through the chaos, my father carrying my younger sister on his back. We had nothing left but each other, and even that, we feared, might be taken from us. It was then I learned my second lesson, that safety is never promised, that peace is fragile, and that the world can turn cruel in the blink of an eye. But I also learned that love gives us courage, even in terror. My parents did not let go of us. Not once. Not even when the nights grew longer and the hunger deeper. We clung to one another, and in that clinging, we survived. As the years passed, I grew older, and the weight of survival fell onto my shoulders too. My childhood vanished quickly, replaced with responsibilities that aged me before my time. I worked the fields. I fetched the water. I cooked when my mother's body gave out from exhaustion. My hands became rough and calloused. My back bent earlier than it should have. Yet within me, there was a fire, a stubbornness that said, no matter how much the world takes from me, it will not take my will to live. Life tested me in ways I could not have imagined then. Death became a shadow that walked beside me. Hunger, loss, displacement. They were not strangers, but companions I knew too well. And yet, within me, there was always a seed of hope. Hope that one day the rains would return. Hope that love could still bloom in the cracks of suffering. Hope that survival was not the end, but the beginning of something greater. Even now, as I sit here with these wrinkled hands resting in my lap, I can still feel the hands of that young girl inside me, the girl who buried her brother, who ran from soldiers, who carried water jars taller than herself, who worked until her body ached but her spirit refused to break. That girl has never left me. She is in every wrinkle on my face, every ache in my bones, every quiet tear I shed when the night is too silent. And so, my story began, not with comfort, not with abundance, but with hardship. Hardship that carved me into who I am. Hardship that taught me resilience. Hardship that whispered into my ear, survive, endure, hope. When I grew into my youth, the world was still scarred from the storms that had passed. Childhood had been stolen from me, but I did not weep for it. Life had demanded I grow quickly, and so I did. By the time I was a young woman, my hands were no longer those of a girl. They were roughened by labor, darkened by sun, strong enough to lift more than they should. But my spirit carried both a heaviness and a quiet longing. The years of war and famine had left our village thin, both in numbers and in laughter. Families had been scattered like seeds in a storm. Some never returned. Some returned only in the form of names spoken in sorrow. But amidst all that loss, people still tried to live. Women still wove cloth. Men still sowed seeds. Children still played in the dust. We knew that life must go on, even when death lingered like a shadow at our side. It was during those years that I first felt the stirrings of love. He was a boy from a neighboring family older than me by a few years. His name I will not speak, for even now, so many decades later, it still carries a tenderness that rests deep in my heart. He had eyes that were steady and kind, eyes that looked at me as though he could see through the exhaustion that weighed on my young face and still find the girl hidden beneath. He laughed easily, and in those days, laughter was a rare gift. He would help my father in the field sometimes, his shirt soaked in sweat, his back bent to the same soil that bent us all. But in the evenings, when the work was done, he would sometimes walk with me to the river where the sun sank low and the water glowed red and gold. We spoke very little, for words were not needed. Our silence was not empty, but filled with the unspoken knowledge that we understood each other's struggles. In those quiet walks I felt something I had not felt in years. Hope, blooming not in survival, but in the possibility of a different life. But life is never so gentle as to give without taking. Just as I began to imagine a future, the tides of unrest grew stronger. The war, which had already stolen so much, came closer to us again. Armed men came through our lands demanding food, shelter, allegiance. Families like ours, who had barely enough for ourselves, were forced to give what we had. My father's harvest was taken, our goats slaughtered, and our village left trembling in the wake of men who carried death in their hands. In those dark days, tragedy struck again. My father, who had always stood like a pillar for us, fell ill. The years of strain, the endless labor, the hunger, and the grief, they had broken something inside him. His strong hands, once so certain, grew weak. His voice, once so steady, trembled with pain. We had no doctors, no medicines, only herbs and prayers. I watched helplessly as his body, which had endured so much, could endure no more. The day he left us, the world seemed to collapse. My mother's wail still echoes in my ears, a sound so raw it pierced the heavens. My sister clung to me, her tears soaking my clothes, as I stood frozen, feeling as though the earth had been pulled from beneath my feet. My father had been the anchor of my life, and without him I felt adrift in a storm I did not know how to weather. That was the second great loss of my life. The first had taken my brother when I was a child. This one, my father, took from me the last remnants of my innocence. I was no longer a girl who dreamed of love by the riverbank. I was a woman who had to carry her family on shoulders that were not yet ready for such weight. I rose before the sun each day to take his place in the fields. My hands blistered, my back bent. My body ached in ways that made me feel far older than my years. My mother, already broken by grief, grew weaker each day, and I became both daughter and caretaker. My sister, still too young, looked at me as though I were now the one who must carry her into tomorrow. And yet, even in those days of sorrow, the boy with kind eyes remained by my side. He helped me in the fields when he could. He brought food when our jars were empty, and sometimes, when the night was too heavy, he sat in silence with me, his presence a balm to my weary heart. Love, I realized, is not always loud and dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet, steady, like a candle burning in a storm. But love, too, was not spared by fate. His family decided to leave the village, to seek safety elsewhere, far from the turmoil that had consumed our land. The day he told me, I felt as though the earth had split open beneath me again. We stood by the river one last time, the sun sinking, the water reflecting our sorrow. He took my hand, calloused like his own, and said words I have never forgotten. We cannot choose the storms life gives us. We can only choose how we stand in them. And then he was gone. I never saw him again. Perhaps he lived. Perhaps he too became one of the many names whispered in grief. I do not know. But his absence carved another hollow into my heart, one that never fully closed. After that, my world became smaller, narrower. Survival was all that remained. I worked, I toiled, I endured. My mother grew frailer, my sister grew into her own youth, and I became the bridge between the past that had been destroyed and the future that still had to be built. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if life would ever be more than loss and labor. I wondered if joy would ever return, if laughter would ever feel natural again. But each morning, as the sun rose, I forced myself to rise too, because I learned then what perhaps is the hardest truth of all, that life does not wait for grief to finish before it demands you keep living. The fields still needed tending. The goats still needed feeding. The water still needed fetching. Death may take those you love, but life demands that you carry on, even when your heart feels too heavy to beat. And so, I carried on, through hunger, through sorrow, through loneliness that sometimes felt like it would consume me whole. I carried on because my mother and sister needed me. I carried on because giving up was not an option. I carried on because even in the deepest night, I believed dawn would come again. Looking back now, I see that those years were the crucible in which I was forged. The losses burned me. The labors shaped me. The sorrows carved me into who I became. I learned resilience not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. I learned strength not because I was strong, but because weakness would have destroyed us. I learned hope not because life gave me reasons to hope, but because without hope, the will to live would have vanished. Those were my youth, my tragedies, my first lessons in what it truly means to endure. They were not easy years, and they left scars that no one can see, but I still feel. But they were also the years that built the woman I became, the woman who sits here now, telling you this story with hands wrinkled but steady, with eyes tired but still filled with light. Life after my youth did not grow easier. If anything, the burdens grew heavier, pressing me into the woman I was forced to become. When my father left us, I thought I had known the sharpest pain that life could give. But life, my child, does not wound only once. It tests you again and again, pushing you to the edge of what you think you can endure, until you discover strength you did not know you had. After my father's death, my mother weakened like a candle burning too fast. The years of famine, the grief of losing her son and husband, and the endless toil had hollowed her spirit. I became her hands, her feet, her strength. By day, I worked the fields, carrying loads twice my size. By night, I cooked what little food we had, bathed her tired body, and sang softly to my younger sister so she would not hear our mother's cries in the dark. Those nights are etched into me. I was young, yes, but my shoulders carried the weight of 3 lives. My sister grew older, stepping slowly into her own womanhood, and I shielded her as best I could. I wanted her to have some piece of a childhood, some piece of joy, even if mine had been taken. I often gave her my share of food when our pots were empty, telling her I was not hungry, though my stomach burned with hunger that made me dizzy. I mended her clothes with thread pulled from old rags, and when the village boys teased her, I stood like a shield, unafraid of the laughter or the whispers they threw at me. But in truth, I was afraid of what would become of us. 2 girls and a fading mother in a world that did not care for women who stood alone. The land was cruel to the weak, and society even crueler. There were eyes that watched us, waiting for an opportunity, waiting for us to stumble. I learned to keep my head down, but my heart sharp. For survival was not only about feeding the body, but about protecting dignity in a world eager to strip it away. When my mother finally left us too, I thought my chest would collapse from the weight of grief. I had buried my brother, then my father, and now I buried the woman whose love had been the thread holding my life together. I dug my hands into the soil of her grave until my nails broke, as though I could pull her back, as though the earth might pity me and return her. But the earth is merciless. It takes and does not give back. With her gone, I was left with only my sister. She was still too young to fully understand the depth of our loss, but she clung to me as though I were the only solid ground left in her world. And perhaps I was. From that day, I became not just her sister, but her mother, her father, her guardian, her everything. Those were the years that shaped me most. I learned to fight not with weapons, but with endurance. I learned to push my body beyond its limits, to carry loads I should not have been able to carry, to work in fields from sunrise to sunset, to negotiate with merchants who tried to cheat me, to stand tall even when my bones ached and my heart felt broken. I learned the language of survival, the silent strength of those who refuse to fall, no matter how many storms beat against them. There were nights when loneliness became unbearable. I would lie on my mat staring at the roof, listening to the sound of my sister breathing beside me, and feel the hollow emptiness where my parents' voices used to be. In those nights, I spoke to them in silence, asking my father for his strength, my mother for her gentleness, my brother for his innocence. And though I received no answer, something inside me always stirred, a reminder that their blood flowed in me, that I carried them in every heartbeat, in every breath, in every struggle. As the years passed, my sister grew into a young woman. I was proud of her, proud that she still smiled, still found joy in small things, even after all she had lost. But with her youth came another burden, finding her a place in the world, finding her safety in marriage. In our society, a woman alone was always vulnerable, and I knew that for her to have any chance at stability, I would need to give her what little I had. So, I worked harder, saving every coin, every handful of grain, every scrap of cloth, until I could arrange a marriage for her. I watched her leave our home with tears in her eyes and a husband by her side. My heart broke as the last of my family walked away, but I told myself it was not the end. It was my gift to her, my sacrifice, so she might have a life I could not. After she left, I remained alone. For the first time in my life, the house was silent, not with the temporary silence of sleep, but with the permanent silence of solitude. It was then that the weight of all I had endured pressed down hardest. With no one to care for, no one to shield, I was forced to face my own emptiness. The nights became long, the days mechanical. Work, eat, sleep. Work, eat, sleep. Yet within that monotony, something was born, something stronger than despair. I realized that I had survived what many could not. I had endured famine, war, loss, loneliness, and yet I was still here. My body was scarred, my heart fractured, but I had not broken. I carried on, not because I wanted to, but because something inside me refused to surrender. That is when I understood what resilience truly is. It is not about being unshaken. It is about being shaken again and still standing. And so I stood. I lived through years of hardship that seemed endless. Some days I felt like a ghost moving through the motions of life, unseen, unimportant. Other days I found sparks of joy, when the rains finally returned and the earth bloomed green again, when a neighbor's child laughed and reminded me of innocence, when I sat alone under the stars and felt for a brief moment the vastness of the universe and my small place in it. I survived, my child, not because life was kind to me, but because I refused to let it defeat me. I survived because even in the darkest hours I held on to hope like a flame cupped in trembling hands. I survived because love, though it had been taken from me again and again, still lived inside me. Not the love of romance, not the love of family, but the deep, stubborn love of life itself. Those middle years of my life were long, painful, and lonely. They carved me into the woman you see before you now, wrinkled, tired, but unbroken. And if I tell you anything, let it be this. Strength is not born in comfort. It is born in fire. And I was forged in fire. As the years stretched on and my hair turned from black to strands of silver, I began to see life differently. The pains of my youth, the sorrows of my middle years, all of them once felt like endless storms that would drown me. Yet with time I realized that storms do not last forever. They come, they rage, they strip you bare, but eventually they pass, leaving behind a silence where new seeds can grow. When I was younger, I thought survival was the greatest victory. To wake up each morning, to eat, to work, to sleep, that was enough. But as I aged, as the weight of loneliness softened into acceptance, I began to understand that mere survival is not the whole of life. Life demands more from us. It asks that we find meaning, even in suffering. It asks that we discover beauty, even in the cracks of a broken heart. It asks that we create light, even when surrounded by shadows. I came to learn that grief never disappears. People will tell you that time heals all wounds, but that is not true. Time does not heal. Time teaches. The wounds remain, but they become part of you like scars on the skin. At first they throb, they ache. They remind you every moment of what you have lost, but slowly they quiet. They settle into your being, and you learn to live with them. They become stories etched into your bones, stories that shape how you see the world. And from grief, I learned compassion. When I saw others mourning, I no longer looked at them with pity from afar. I recognized their pain as my own. I learned to sit beside the grieving without offering empty words, simply sharing in their silence. For sometimes, the greatest kindness we can give is not advice, not solutions, but presence. A hand on the shoulder, a tear shed together. That is enough. From hardship, I learned gratitude. You may think it strange to speak of gratitude after a life filled with loss, but it is true. For when you have known hunger, even a small piece of bread tastes like a feast. When you have walked through loneliness, even a brief smile from a stranger feels like sunlight. When you have buried those you love, every day you wake to see the sky again feels like a blessing. Hardship stripped me of illusions, but it also sharpened my vision. It taught me to see the beauty in small, simple things that others overlook. From labor, I learned humility. My back bent in fields, my hands cracked with work, my body aching from endless days. These were not curses, though I thought so once. They were teachers. They reminded me that we are not above the earth, but part of it. We till it. We sweat into it. We are buried in it. Pride has no place when you live close to the soil. Humility is the knowledge that we are small, but that in our smallness we are connected to something vast. From loneliness I learned self-reliance. There were years when I had no one to lean on, no one to share my burdens. At first, the silence was suffocating. I would sit in the evenings, hearing only the echo of my own breath and feel as though I were vanishing. But slowly, I learned that solitude does not have to mean emptiness. In solitude, I discovered my own strength, my own company, my own voice. I learned to be my own friend, my own comfort, my own guide. It is not an easy lesson, but it is a powerful one, to stand alone and still feel whole. And from all of it, I learned hope. Hope is not something given, it is something chosen. Again and again, I had reason to give up, to let despair swallow me whole. But each time, I chose to hope. Hope that tomorrow would be kinder. Hope that suffering would not last forever. Hope that love, even if lost, would live again in another form. Hope became my rebellion, my quiet defiance against the cruelty of life. And it carried me here, to this moment, where I can sit and speak, not as a victim of life, but as one who has endured it. As I grew older, the seasons became gentler to me. My body weakened, yes, but my heart grew softer, my eyes clearer. I no longer chased after what was lost. I no longer clung to bitterness for what had been taken. Instead, I looked at what I still had. A roof above me, food to eat, a bed to sleep in, a sky to look at, a heart that still beat. These were riches enough. I watched the younger generation rise, full of energy and dreams, and though I worried for them, for the storms that life would surely bring, I also smiled, for I knew that they too would learn, not through my words perhaps, but through their own journeys, their own fires. Each soul must find its own strength, its own wisdom. But if my story can plant even one seed of resilience in them, then my suffering will not have been in vain. There is a truth I came to understand late in life. Love is the only thing that outlives us. Not the houses we build, not the wealth we gather, not the names we carve into stone. Love, the kindness we show, the sacrifices we make, the hands we hold, that is what lingers after we are gone. My parents' love lives in me still, though their bodies returned to the earth long ago. My brother's laughter, my father's strength, my mother's tenderness, all of it lives on in my heart, guiding me even now. So, when you ask me what lesson life has taught me, I will say this: endure with strength, live with humility, love without fear, and never let hope die in you. The storms will come, yes. They will strip you bare, they will leave you trembling. But remember, storms do not last. What remains after the storm is what defines you. And now, in these twilight years, as I sit in the dim light of my small home, I feel no anger at the hardships I endured. I feel gratitude. Gratitude that I was given the chance to live, to love, to lose, to survive, to learn. My story is not one of endless suffering, but of endurance, of transformation, of finding light even in darkness. And if there is one thing I wish for those who come after me, it is that they, too, will learn not to fear the fire, but to be forged by it. My child, as I sit here in this fading evening light, with your small hand resting in mine, I feel the circle of life turning gently before my eyes. The years behind me stretch long, filled with laughter and tears, filled with both loss and survival. The years ahead of me, I know, are fewer now, and soon my footsteps will fade into silence. Yet I do not fear that silence, for I have learned that what truly matters never disappears. It lives on, carried in the hearts of those we love. When I was young, I thought strength meant never breaking, never crying, never stumbling. But now I know true strength is different. True strength is breaking and still rising. It is crying, but wiping your tears and walking forward anyway. It is stumbling, yet choosing to stand again, again, and again. Strength is not the absence of pain. It is the courage to live with it, to shape it into something meaningful. If you remember nothing else from my story, remember this. Love is the only legacy worth leaving. Love is greater than fear, greater than pain, greater than death itself. The love I have carried for those I lost still burns in me now, and it burns in you too, whether you realize it or not. It will guide you when I'm gone, just as it guided me when those I loved were taken. So never be afraid to love, even when it hurts. Love freely, love deeply, love bravely. Do not chase after perfection, my child. Perfection is a shadow, always slipping away no matter how fast you run. Instead, live truthfully, live humbly, live fully. Let your mistakes become your teachers. Let your wounds become your wisdom. Let your scars remind you that you are still here. Do not hide from the world out of fear of being broken. The world will break you anyway. But if you let it, the world will also remake you stronger, wiser, softer, truer. One day, you will face storms of your own. You will feel the weight of loneliness, the sting of loss, the bite of disappointment. When that day comes, I want you to hear my voice in your heart. I want you to remember that storms do not last, that you were born of resilience, that you carry within you the strength of generations before you. You are not fragile, even when you feel you are. You are fire. You are light. You are the continuation of every sacrifice that came before you. I am only a grandmother living my final years in a small home filled with old memories. My hands are wrinkled, my steps slow, my breath sometimes short. But through my voice, through this story, I place something eternal in your keeping. A seed, a flame, a legacy. Do not let it die. Carry it forward into a future I will never see. Let it light your path when the nights grow dark, and when you have children or grandchildren of your own, tell them my story. Tell them not because it is mine, but because it is theirs too. For life, my child, is not about what we take, but about what we give, not about what we keep, but about what we leave behind. And I leave you this, the knowledge that you are stronger than your fears, braver than your doubts, and more capable than you can imagine. You will fall, yes, but you will rise, and each time you rise, you will rise higher. So now, as the evening fades into night and the first stars begin to appear, I leave you with this call. Live boldly, love deeply, endure bravely, and never lose hope. When the world tells you it is too hard, too late, too painful, stand taller. When fear whispers in your ear, answer it with courage. When despair knocks at your door, greet it with defiance. Live so fully that when your final day comes, you will not fear the darkness, for your light will continue to shine in those you touched. That is my story, my gift, my final wish for you. Do not let it rest in silence. Take it with you, walk with it, live by it. And one day, when another small hand rests in yours, pass it on. For stories are not meant to die. They are meant to live, to breathe, to guide. And so my story will live on through you. And now, as I hold your hand and feel the warmth of youth against the fragility of age, I smile. For I know that even when I am gone, I will not be lost. I will live in your laughter, in your tears, in your choices, in your courage. My life was not easy, but it was full. My heart was broken, but it was never empty. My journey was long, but it was worth every step. Go, my child. Live. Live for me. Live for yourself. Live for those who came before and those who will come after. And never forget, you are the continuation of my hope, my love, my legacy.